near-death experiences are some of the most vivid examples of how our minds operate outside of our brain and body. The essence of a near-death experience is that you understand things, you have certain experiences that cannot be explained by a sick and dying brain. And these experiences are utterly vivid. They make a tremendous difference in how people orient their lives after they come back from these experiences. And so they're transformative. I don't think you can explain these incredible, life-changing, transformative experiences by saying, well, these are just the products of hallucinations and fantasy from a brain that really isn't working well. You can't get these highly refined experiences from a sick and dying brain. And in spite of this, materialists continue to harp on the fact that people are just making this stuff up. There's no evidence for that. And fortunately, people who have looked at near-death experiences under the most exacting situations come back saying something important is going on here. This is not consciousness operating at a very low level. This is consciousness operating at a very high, sophisticated level. There are several aspects of a near-death experience that point to the fact that our mind operates outside of our brain and our physical senses. One is the live review. These happen extremely rapidly, and they seem to defy the sense of flowing time, which we have in our ordinary daily experience. Also, people have vivid experiences of meeting people who have died before. What is fascinating about these kinds of experiences is that in a lot of instances, people who are at the bedside attending the individual who is dying also have experiences of seeing these individuals from the other side as vivid as you can imagine. So this group experience of a near-death experiences is utterly important in going beyond this idea that that person who is sick in bed and who is dying is just having some sort of hallucination. And also, as a physician, I'm interested in people who come back from the near-death experiences with skills that they didn't have before they had the experience. In my book, One Mind, I review some of the experiences of individuals who had no interest or skills in healing, who, after they recovered, had these remarkable abilities to understand illness, to diagnose illness, and to treat illness. Where did this come from? This is not the sort of thing that you can predict as a result of some sort of quirky biochemical neurological abnormality of a sick and dying brain. If you lump all of these observations together, I think you have to say, this demands our attention, because this defies what we're taught in physiology and biology classes and medical schools, because it suggests a way of knowing and an accessing of information that is utterly majestic, that we would just simply lump all of this sort of data and dismiss it as just hallucination strikes me as really rather crazy. One of the commonest results from a near-death experience is that people experience the fear of death as something that just goes away, it evaporates. It's not present when they return to their normal existence. One reason they do this is because of the assurances that they have by meeting people on the other side who would tell them that there's nothing to fear. I even have a friend who has had a near-death experience, which she came back laughing because she thought it was so silly that she was horrified of death before she had this experience. Also, people have this experience of time as something that doesn't escape. It's not running away, it's not going anywhere. So they experience a sense of time as stillness. So there's nothing to be afraid of. And plus, there's the experience of unity with everything that is. It's a euphoric feeling. People have a joyful experience during these moments. And this, for many people, is the most meaningful experience that they can imagine or have ever had in this life. And so you put all of these factors together, and people come back that in a way in which they are utterly transformed from fear of death. Many people look forward to it, saying that I didn't want to come back here in the first place. I wanted to stay over there because the contrast is so great. So the lack of fear, the dissipation of fear, the evaporation of this terror is something that near-death experiences are a therapy for. I happen to believe, in my experience as a physician, that the fear of death and total annihilation with physical death has caused more suffering in the history of the human race than all the physical diseases combined. And what we know from these testimonies of 15 million Americans now who have had a near-death experience, that the near-death experience is a therapy. It's an antidote for this horrible fear and terror of physical death. And so I'm not one to recommend near-death experiences. They're not always reversible. But the message is clear. The fear of death is overdone by people who have come as close to dying as we can possibly imagine. And this is one of the human experiences that really deserve to be taken seriously. I think it's important that healthcare professionals open up to this experience and never denigrate it or criticize people for talking about these experiences. You know, this was something that one could hardly talk about before the 1970s when Dr. Raymond Moody wrote his famous book, which opened up this whole world. You know, there was an entire stigma associated with talking about precognition, seeing other beings and being met by a transcendent being or going through a tunnel toward the light. This was an effective way of getting yourself placed on antipsychotic medication, or worse. Healthcare professionals have every reason to promote and encourage people toward talking about these things. First of all, it's just therapeutic. It helps people reintegrate into life. I've known people who have been so criticized by their doctor that they have been banished from the doctor's practice because they talked about these experiences. I've known many people who have had their marriages fall apart because their spouses couldn't handle this kind of talk. We need to loosen up as a culture and acknowledge up front that consciousness can do things when the brain is sick that we can't experience in ordinary life. It's unfortunate that people have to nearly die to get to this place, and the good news is that they don't. Because the more we're able to talk about this sort of thing and open up, the more likely it is for people to experience these states of consciousness without nearly dying. That's where we need to get to in our culture. And doctors, healthcare professionals, nurses can effectively open this door and say, it's okay to talk about this sort of thing. This is real. These people are not making this up. So if doctors want to say, trust me, I'm a doctor, I know about these things, and it's okay for you to talk like this,